In the health and wellness space and in science in general, I think that there's so much that we still do not understand. And anyone who claims to have it all figured out clearly doesn't. So today I have Dr. William Bengston here on the podcast, and we are going to dive into this topic of water even further and how this operates in the body. Now, as I mentioned, I think that there are so many people who are really stuck in this biochemical model of science and subscribing to research that has, of course, been bought and paid for, and you really don't know who you can trust. And most people aren't going to read studies in the first place, they're just going to pay attention to headlines. So today we are going to dive more into this realm of how water operates in the body and how really miraculous things can happen when you look at health through this lens. Now, Dr. Bengston has a product which is essentially informed water. Again, it's one of those things, take it or leave it, but we have been trying it out with my daughter since we recorded this episode. So it's been about 6 weeks now. And I do have to say, I have noticed a difference with her, and I will continue to report more on that. So if you're interested in what we talk about here in the show, again, you can take it or leave it, but it's interesting information. You can use the code Sarah, and the link will be down in the show notes for you if you want to check this out further. Again, lots of really interesting information, studies, and testimonies on his website. And it really does fit in line with this model of healing, not through the biochemical model that so many people are just so completely attached to their own detriment. So enjoy this episode, and I will talk with you again soon. A lot of people are quick to talk about the benefits of sunlight, but what gets often missed in the conversation is the benefit of darkness and the importance of protecting yourself from blue and green light after sunset. That is why I choose Viva Rays as my go-to source for protecting my circadian rhythms. You can use the code YOGI to save 15% off at Viva Rays. Now, you may have seen some of these studies popping up. I call them fear mongering about blue blockers not being effective. And that is a partial truth, because when you use blue blockers that are clear or that have not been tested with a spectrometer to actually block what they say they do, they will not protect your circadian rhythms. And they are not catching those key wavelengths that you need to be blocking in order for your body to be able to repair, for you to make melatonin, which is a master antioxidant. And artificial light at night has been in the scientific literature extensively linked to a host of hormonal cancers, obesity, diabetes, and all sorts of metabolic issues. That, again, is why I choose Viva Rays as my go-to source for protecting my circadian rhythms to allow my body to get adequate darkness at night. You can use the code YOGI to save 15% over at Viva Rays, and you can actually trust that they block the frequencies of light that they say they do. Thanks to Viva Rays for sponsoring today's podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I have a special guest, Dr. Bengston, on, and we are going to talk about healing through a completely different lens. And he's already told me here before I turned on the recording that he's still very much a skeptic. So Dr. Bengston, or you told me I could call you Bill. Let's talk a little bit about how you view healing and the lens through which you view healing.
Well, how I view healing, there's a couple of things you can do with healing. I call them stages or phases of it. I've been doing the research for 115 years. I'm going to do it for about another 80, and then take a day off. But the first step in dealing with something that's odd or something that's anomalous is to demonstrate that this stuff is real. If the stuff is real, my next question would be, what can you do with it? And what can you do with it? I would take as two possibilities. One, you can ask the scientific question, what can you do with it in order to understand or help us understand the way the world works? And the other thing you can do is more of a clinical approach. What can you do with it, and how do we get this to people who need it? And so whether you like, if you can store healing, which you can, and scale healing, which you can, then it becomes a different ball game, rather than silly questions like, is it real? There's been enough studies already, and they go back half a century at least, the really top of the line studies in healing were it started with, I think, Bernard Grad at McGill University. And I call him the great grad. And he was a biologist who did the foundational work, systematically, can't come up with a viable counter hypothesis to it, looking at, in particular, healer Oscar Estebani, and what could he do, plant growth, wound healing in animals, on and on and on. And most of the work that I do is a takeoff of his. I just push the envelope a little bit farther. He did it in the 1950s and the 1960s. I got a little, a good record, since that time.
Yeah. So essentially, you mentioned again before we kind of turn the camera on water, which I talk about a lot, and the fact that our body is 99% water by molecular volume. So how do you, and you talked also about storing and scaling. So maybe we can just dive right into exactly how that looks and from your lens.
Yeah, if you can establish that healing is real, it doesn't mean all claims are real. It just means that there is a phenomenon down at the core of that. And it's a reliable phenomenon. It works. You can predict when it's going to work. You can, a lot of stuff like that. It conforms to scientific principles. So it's easy. It's pretty easy to design healing research. I've done it with cell cultures. I've done it with mice. I've done it with cell medium. I've done it in Faraday cages. I've done it with EEGs. I've done it with functional MRIs. I mean, I can go on. Again, doing this for 206 years, I got a lot of stuff. But the question is, after you've done a couple of hundred studies, and after you've looked at a couple of hundred other studies, what do you got? And what you do have is a big wow. I mean, it really is a big wow. So the good card-carrying skeptic like myself, a skeptic incidentally doesn't mean I disbelieve. A skeptic means I'm open. And I think people misuse the idea of skepticism quite often. They confuse skepticism with believers. And believers come in two flavors. Those people who really believe everything is true, and those people who really believe everything is false. I'm not a believer. I don't know enough to be a believer. So I say, let's find out. Let's be open. I'll be cautiously open. That's what a skeptic is.
I love
People have
that.
misused that. I don't like the way they use it. Like they mean skeptic means I don't believe in this stuff. They get all harumphy and stuff. And to those people, I say, lighten up. Healing. There's such a core of so much stuff that if you are not open to it, doesn't mean believe this or that. But if you're not open to it, then I pity you. I mean, that's
Yeah.
all I can say is I pity you because there's such a wealth of data out there that it's particularly interesting. So I think that once we have a few hundred studies and a few hundred of those have a few hundred studies and on, the next question is where do we go from here? Because you don't want to keep repeating the same thing over and over again.
Right.
The people who are disbelievers, and they call themselves skeptics, but people who are disbelievers will always say, do it one more time.
Right.
Do it one more time. And it's not just me, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So I have, for example, now 20 mouse experiments with cancerous mice that have 100% death, and we cure them. And the mice are cured for life. And re-injections won't take. That's pretty interesting.
So re-injecting them with the cancer?
Doesn't take. You can't give them cancer anymore.
Wow.
You can take it farther. Once you've cured a mouse, you can take blood from that mouse and put it into another fully infected mouse, and it'll cure that mouse of cancer. And what that means is, extrapolating, What that means is the mouse has now the information inside of it that can be transferred. That's storing healing.
Mm.
Could we, for example, make a cancer vaccine out of a healing experiment? And so far, it looks like we can. Now, whether
Mm.
we'll actually ever be able to use it, I don't know, but it's kind of fun to play around with it. And I'm hoping to have, some work done in the next some odd years on can we build a cancer vaccine? Now, wouldn't it
Interesting.
be kind of fun to say, where'd your cancer vaccine come from? Crazy healing. You know, I mean, that'd be pretty interesting. Now, the question is, if that's the case, do you think people are going to say, well, just do it one more time, or you think people will clamor for the vaccine? People are going to clamor for the vaccine. Because now we're talking about once you've established something, and once you've established it, umpteen times. I've done it in 6 medical schools. I've done it in another half dozen biology labs. What's enough? And
Right.
I think 20 mouse experiments and 200 cell experiments and all that stuff, it's enough already. What's the next step, in the progression? And
Right.
I think the next step in the progression, there's kind of a two-pronged approach. What's the pure scientific question, which means what'd you learn? What do we learn about the way the world works? Well, one of the things we've learned is we don't understand the way the world works, and
Right.
serious surprises come popping up that we go, ooh, ah, and skeptics like myself go, wow, let's do it again. And I try to always do independent labs at least 2 times before I'll make a statement. So the other thing you can do is turn it into just a straight clinical approach. What can we do with it? How do we mass produce it and give it out as a clinical approach? These are directions that I think we're moving towards, but there's still people locked into the old stuff of like, do it one more time. So I
Mm.
still get calls from various parts of the world every week saying, we'd love to help you. Your data are amazing. Do it one more time. And I say, no, won't do it anymore. I've done enough. We know the basic idea. I'd be happy to work with you if you want to make it practical. If I'll be happy to work with it if you want to help us understand something. I'd like to work with you as long as you can be a skeptic. And what's a skeptic? An open-minded person who
Right.
says, show me.
Right.
But out there's too much. Do it one more time. You look at something like the Pear Lab at Princeton, looking at can consciousness affect random number generators? Yes.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's not, it's a stupid question at this point. They got 30 years of, beautiful data,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Just
someone who considers themselves skeptical, which they're not, a disbeliever will say, if you could just do it the 31st year, you've only done it 30 years. And of course, you do it the 31st year. And if you could just do it the 32nd year. And I say to all those people, you're not being a skeptic, you're being an idiot. I'm tired
yeah.
of
I'm at
idiots.
the place where I'm like, well, just don't do it then. Then it's not for you. With like with structured water, and people ask me, oh, has Emoto's work ever been duplicative? Yes, double-blind placebo studies have shown that groups of people, their consciousness can impact water. That
Yeah,
has
Dean
been,
Radin's in on some of that stuff too. Dean
yeah,
does beautiful work.
it's there.
Yeah, it
So
happens.
I just tell people, well, then just don't drink it. Then if you don't believe, just don't do it.
Don't do it.
No one's forcing you. No one's, but this is something that uh, could possibly be helpful if you want to have an open mind. And that's where I think a lot of my community people that listen to this show in particular, they are at the place where they do have this open mind. They're open to ideas and possibilities. And so
Yeah.
is it water that you use? I've got the Chris sent me two. The one is called Restore, and then the other one is called Recover. So is this basically, is it programmed water, or all the studies, all the things that you're talking about, is that basically what it's doing, is programming the water? Or is there a different
Well, I wanted to see, first of all, what can I store it in? So when I give the example of a mouse that can transfer a cancer cure to another mouse, um, that implies to me that you can store healing information. I don't think there's energy, incidentally, but you can store healing information in a living thing,
mm,
and that contains the memory of. Now we're used to that stuff in other areas. So if I say, I got my immune system kicked in and it had the memory of a previous, nobody gets excited. But if I say healing transformed the genomics of a mouse, and that transference now can be used to heal other mice.
mm,
And obviously we can move up the chain and go to, how about people? Uh, so what can we store the stuff in? Well, we can store it in a living mouse. We probably could store it in a human, but we haven't done that. We
mm,
can store it in cells. We can store it in the cell medium, the stuff that you use in labs to grow cells in. So if you're going to do in vitro studies, you're going to have a bunch of cells and a bunch of well plates and such, and you need a nutrient bath for them to live. Well,
mhm,
we can do a treatment, so to speak, on that cell medium, ship it to another lab across the country, and now it'll take the healing with it. It's in the cell medium. We can store it in cotton. And that goes back to the great grad is the one who discovered that. We can store it in cotton. We have experiments where we have cancer cells. I don't have a piece of cotton with me, so I'll just say piece of cotton. I'm not prepared for show and tell. Yeah, so we have a well plate, we have a piece of cotton, and we start to bring the treated cotton near the cancer cells, and they start to genomically flip.
mm,
In other words, the cells themselves can recognize when cotton has been treated. Now that's interesting. What else can we store it in? Well, we've done experiments with water. Fortunately, I have some
mm,
water, and so we've taken. This is done at a medical school. We take the water and we train it. We infuse it with healing intention, and we feed it to mice to mice that we've never met. The water itself will not cure the mice. So if you do hands-on or you do it in water, what's the difference? And the answer is it doesn't seem to be a difference. So water works, cell medium works, the biology of mice works, cotton works, a bunch of things work, but some things are easier to change and easier to scale than others. So if I have a piece of cotton that works, I can go back and say, well, here are the data that suggests cotton works, and cotton retains using it loosely, memory, contains the information. I don't know if it remembers, but it contains the information that can be passed on. But can cotton charge other cotton?
mm.
In other words, if I've got 1,000 people who need pieces of cotton, how in heaven's name am I going to do that? How many pieces of cotton can you treat versus how many people have some need?
Mhm.
There's an inexhaustible supply of people in pain out there.
Mhm.
I don't have enough cotton in the world to get to them. So is
Yeah.
there a way to mass scale this? And it turns out we have a couple of different ways that we are showing tremendous promise to mass scale this. What is water? What is an actual recording?
Hmm. So
And
sound, essentially.
say it again.
Sound, essentially?
It's not, no, because there's no sound that you can hear. It's at frequencies you can't hear.
Frequencies. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, there's frequencies, and it turns out it's extremely low frequencies.
Okay.
No, when people say raise your frequencies or raise your vibration, I
I don't know
say
how much
no,
I've
no, no, lower it, lower it,
I
lower it,
mean,
lower it.
that I've always thought the same thing. High frequency is like to me, that doesn't seem like something I'd want to do. I don't know. I've just intuitively always not really resonated with that high
Yeah.
frequency. I've always said, well, why are we not trying to ground and, you know, I feel like it'd be desirable to be at a lower frequency, contrary
Well,
to
it
all
turns
the
out it
chatter out
turns out
there.
it seems you seem to be right.
Interesting.
Uh, I don't say that the study is nailed and it's over and it's not worth doing it. It's, some more. There's still some holes we got to patch in this thing. But
Mm,
all the evidence is showing lower frequencies matter more than higher frequencies.
interesting.
Um, so the question is, what can we use? What can we store? And what can we scale? I can store healing intention in cotton. I can store it in a mouse. But even with the case of a mouse, how many blood transfusions am I going to take? How many mice
Right.
need help? you know,
Yeah.
how many people
Yeah.
need help? How many injections would we have to make? It's really hard. So
Mm,
some stuff seems to work better. If I can get a recording, and I have a bunch of publications on this, if I can get a recording to work, I could imagine loading it up to the cloud
mm,
and being able to download it
yeah.
any place in the world.
Hmm.
That'd be interesting. Now, the
That
reality
would be.
is, although I have a bunch of studies on it, the recording is not as good as the original live healing. It'll
Yeah.
do
No.
similar things, but it doesn't do them quite as robustly.
Mm,
On the other hand, when we store healing information in water and we mass produce it through a gizmo, it seems like it's reproducing the original healing intention. So the best storage that is coupled with scaling so far, because the research is going on, it so far seems to be water. But I've got a research program going out. It's a long-winded way to your question,
mm.
which
No,
you've
I like
probably
it.
forgotten. But it's a long-winded way of saying the two arms that I'm doing active research in is what can we do with recording stuff? What can we do with water stuff? So far, the water stuff seems to be winning.
Mm. Okay.
So if I were someone who needed a treatment and I was looking for a mass produced mode, I would go with water over so far.
Okay.
Now, if we have a technology, we'll see where we go in the future. The research goes on. And if we can mass produce something, then a bunch of people can use it. It's pretty interesting. So we're starting to get into combinations of fundamental questions, fundamental scientific questions. Is the stuff real, and what are the parameters and what are the correlates? And the second question is, are we ready to start clinical trials? And the answer is yes. So we've
Mm.
done a bunch of stuff with informed water that has been imbued with information. I mean, that's the way we're thinking of it, imbued with information that can be reproduced by the person, taking some drops of water. And we've
Mm.
got, for example, published double-blind, randomized, clinically controlled, you name it, the gold standard of anything you can think of on COVID patients going into a hospital
Mm.
to be treated for COVID. We got 160 people in our latest study. We've got a couple of studies, 160 people going into a COVID hospital who have been tested up and down the wazoo. They've been, they got the standard tests. And they're taking medical stuff, and they're
Mm.
randomized into a couple of groups. Some of the groups are taking only water. Some of the groups are taking water that's been charged, so to speak.
Yes.
And we're comparing that to what is the effect of the people who are taking traditional medical treatments. And it turns out this water, for reasons that I can't understand, to be kind, the reasons I can't understand, blew away the medical intervention.
Mm.
The patients didn't know what they were getting. The doctors administering under the tongue drops to the patients didn't know what they were getting. The whole thing was blinded. And it wasn't a fair fight. This water does something that's significant. And I can
Mm,
state that, as a good card carrying skeptic, but I can say I don't know of anything that works better than the water. And
mm,
that's interesting because we can mass produce the water. So as a one possible clinical application, just one possible clinical application, could we make a bunch of water and give it to a bunch of people with COVID? Yes. Does anybody with COVID want it? I don't know. But, I'm doing the control studies. But at least now you have the option. You don't need to have COVID.
mm.
If you want COVID, happy birthday. I'm not saving the world. I'm just offering options.
Hmm.
Uh, you don't have to believe in it. You think this is the dumbest thing you've ever heard, but I'd still put the drops under the tongue.
Yeah,
And if you look at the changes in the PCR output, it's not a fair fight. The PCR
really
goes from positive to negative really fast if you put this stuff under your tongue.
interesting. And that's the is that the recover?
It's both, it's recover and restore.
Okay. So they're doing
Uh,
both.
so so the recover um, is a geared antiviral. Restore is kind of a general health thing.
Okay.
Um, and we also did 3 other clinical trials on Restore, and we had people with various conditions, mental, physical, spiritual, you name it. They had whatever they had, and they took these drops under the tongue, 2 drops under the tongue, 6 times a day for 8 weeks, and we watched what happened to their symptoms, and
Hmm.
it was startling. 98%
Interesting.
of the people in 3 clinical trials of 300 report significant improvement.
Interesting.
And the interesting part, the way I like the description is they don't know what changed in them, but something got better.
Mm,
And they say, I'm better for having taken it. How do I get more?
mm.
And I sit there,
It's
scratch my head and go, what? What? Why are you getting better?
I mean it's fascinating. It's very outside of the box because I've had I've had people on the podcast and talked with people offline that actually think that viruses and these things don't actually exist, that it's kind of the presentation of water in the body has become non-coherent essentially. And I know that people hearing this are like, what? Blasphemy? Absolutely not. Like they're disbelievers. But I'm
Yeah.
at this point where I'm willing to I'm skeptical, right? I'm a skeptic. I love your definition of a skeptic. I'm definitely gonna use that, but
I encourage, 600
I love
years
it.
of worth of research, I'm still a skeptic because I go, this can't be. It doesn't make any sense, for crying out loud. Make it stop. It won't stop.
Yeah, I mean, you get to a point where things that you see things and they don't make sense. How do people have spontaneous healings? How do people they're told you have 3 months to live and they die in 3 months? You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
there's a programming impact, I think that's happening in both situations. You've decided to go with the programming of no, this is not a I can spontaneously heal. There's a possibility of that. And then there's the other person who takes the word and allows that to program the cells in a specific way. Um, Not to discount or gaslight anyone's situation, but I think that looking at Veda Austin's work and Dr. Gerald Pollack's work and just how much our bodies are just made of water,
Yeah.
it makes so much more sense to me because there's so much, all the science, all the data, all the research.
It's interesting. So, one of the people you're mentioning, Jerry Pollack, we got a project going on right now.
Ah,
And we're trying to figure out what happens to the water once it's been treated. He's the head water guy.
yep.
So I know Jerry for years,
Oh
and
wow.
he's a wonderful guy.
He
And
is.
and and so you say, Jerry, Come on, water guy, get your act together. What's happening to the water? It doesn't make any sense. Why would treated water fix a cancerous mouse? What's happened to the water?
Mm.
And what we've played around with at University of Washington, and we find that stuff, with his various toys. He doesn't
Hmm.
call them toys, but he's got, you go into his lab and he's got toys everywhere. And he's looking at this, and this about water, and these wonderful stuff. And stuff happens. In other words, the output of the water shouldn't be, and
Mm.
frequencies are coming out that shouldn't be.
Mm.
And I say, Jerry, what does this mean? He says, this means you have a reliable scientific anomaly, but you have a real effect. What does it mean, Jerry? I have no idea.
I love
So
it.
when we get a particular output, and then you get a particular frequency and because of the particular input, and there it is. There's your signal. What does that mean? I don't know. It means it shouldn't be there by everything I know, but I don't know what it actually is.
Mm.
That's interesting stuff.
Hmm.
So what can a skeptic do? You did the water wrong? You really think Jerry Pollock did the water? I don't think so. You think everything was done wrong? I don't think so. You think it's done wrong in this lab, this lab, this lab, and this lab? Lighten up. Be a skeptic. Stop being a believer.
I love it. Yeah. I think that's a great place to go is be a skeptic. I love that.
But the thing is, even if Jerry, we sit there and he doesn't seem to be able to figure it out, even if we don't figure it out, even if we all sit there scratching our heads going, I don't know what this is, but something's going on. No matter what you say about the fundamental question of is it real? Yes,
Hmm.
it's real. It's
Hmm.
objectively real. But now, how do we use it?
Right.
If we couldn't scale water, it's curious, but not scalable.
Mm.
If we couldn't scale cotton, and I don't think I haven't been able to figure out how to do it, since we can't scale water, or we can scale water, but we can't scale cotton, if I'm an individual patient, will I be helped by cotton? Yes. But what about the other million people? If I have this water, it turns out it's easier to scale, and I actually could give it to a million people.
Mm.
So right now, the betting's on water. In the future, I don't know. Let's see. Let's skeptically look at the stuff. Let's see
Yeah.
what's scalable and how we might be able to scale it. But we figured out a
Yeah.
way to scale water, and now it's a distribution problem.
Hmm. And getting the right people behind it. And then also, I wonder how much of the pharmaceutical industry would want something like this to stop, because I know Dr. Pollock's lab has been in danger of being shut down for many years now, probably still. Um, because this is the sort of thing that definitely goes against the mainstream talk of quote unquote healing, because we don't I don't think allopathic medicine heals anything. I think they suppress everything,
Yeah.
which ends up creating more issues.
Well, and
It's
it turns out when you take the water, I don't find any side effects whatsoever.
hmm.
That's useful. If you're taking a COVID vaccine, there
Mm.
are reported side effects.
Oh yeah,
If you
you don't have to
take
tell me.
water for COVID, and I'm not making a medical, if you take water for COVID, our water anyway, no side effects, you're covered.
Mm.
If someone wants to shut us down, okay, okay.
Mm.
You know what? It's going to drive it. It's not the scientific community. It's people who
No,
want help.
exactly, exactly.
So you
Ex-
got defenders of the textbooks. You got people who are more practical. And after a while, the defenders of the textbooks are going to be overrun by the people who say, shut up and give me the water.
Absolutely.
We'll see how
Yeah.
it goes.
Every pharmaceutical has some sort of a side effect. And I mean, it's a tough call. Because sometimes it is a life or death situation. And you have to make that decision to use allopathic medicine.
Yeah.
But
Eh, I'm not anti in any way. Some of the stuff in
right.
allopathic medicine is wonderful.
Yeah.
It's really top of the line stuff, and let's follow the data. You
Hmm.
got these data, you got these data. I mean, is should the stuff, for example, should our water be considered
Medicinal.
complementary or should it be
Yeah.
alternative?
Yeah.
Should you take
Yeah.
it as an alternative or should you take it with something? And if it's the with something, what is the with?
Hmm.
So can I take the water and grapefruit? Does that help? Does that hurt? Is it irrelevant?
Mm.
In the way that if I'm just going to go allopathic here for a second, if someone gives you statins,
Hmm.
you're not supposed to take grapefruit.
Oh,
Well, you
really?
can, yeah, you can't. I mean, they'll say, you'll be flopping on the floor and all this kind of stuff is going to happen, but it's a big side effect, grapefruit and statins. Again, I'm not making a medical diagnosis here.
No.
But if you go to a allopathic physician and you're supposed to be on this, they're going to tell you, don't do that.
Hmm.
Um, that doesn't mean the stuff doesn't work. It just means there's side effects.
Hmm.
And what can we combine it with? Well, can you combine, let's cross bridges here. Can you combine what we're doing with allopathic approaches? Are they antagonistic?
Yeah,
Are
that's a
they
good question.
reinforceable? These are, I think, reasonable. We don't need to get all worked up and, in a corner. I like this better and you like that. Forget it. Just what do you got? What are the data? And how do we make it better?
Mm.
Everybody relax, take a breath. We
Hmm.
don't know what we're talking about either way. I don't know how
Exactly.
the water works. Jerry doesn't know how the water works. The water works. I can show you the water works, but I
Mm.
can't tell you really how it works. I can't tell you really how a lot of allopathic things work. Some
I think there's a
allopathic things
resonance,
don't go with that.
right?
Maybe some of the unorthodox healing doesn't go with that either. Let's
Hmm.
find out. And
Yeah.
the good news is the skeptic doesn't have to defend the beliefs in either camp. They say,
Mm.
let's find out.
Absolutely. So you mentioned COVID. That's something that you guys have done actual trials on, or is there anything else? I was skimming over the website a little bit before we jumped on here, and I'll make sure I have that linked in the show notes for everybody.
Which
Uh,
website?
the one that Chris sent me, I think it's I don't know if it's on the bottle or not. I'll have to, I think it's just bangsproducts.com is the
Vegas,
website.
I think it's called, I got a note here, what I was supposed to say, because I don't know, not my turf. Bengston Health, one word, bengstonhealth.com.
Okay, got it.
But my research site, if you want to know, the details of the kind of stuff we're talking about, is just called bengstonresearch.com.
Okay.
In order to get the water, if you want it, bengstonhealth.com. If you want to look at my stuff, bengstonresearch.com.
Okay. I'll put that in the show
Wait,
notes.
I'm sorry. I think I gave that out wrong. Bangs Health.
Bangsproducts.com. Yep.
No, I got bengshealth.com.
Okay.
One word, bengshealth.com.
Okay. I'm gonna bangshealth.com. Okay.
Yeah, so people yell at me and say, you didn't mention bengshealth.com. I forgot. I'm just talking about my stuff because I'm self-absorbed.
Yeah, I was looking through some of the testimonials. One is saying rapid COVID recovery and energy back after getting long COVID. Um, And then one person said headache gone, health restored, miraculous turnaround for my dog, and then recovered in days thanks to Bang's health. So lots of interesting testimonials on the website. So these are just not, I'm thinking not really like trials, just people who've tried it out and have testimonials to share, right?
Yeah, if you want to, yeah, I'm not involved in that at all. I'm not putting it down.
Okay.
It's just I had to look up even what the site was. I'm bad in sales. I was talking about research. Research to me is my passion. And if you want to read research stuff, I can't say this out loud. You're not going to get it on bengshealth.com. You're going to get it at bengstonresearch.com because that's got
Okay.
dozens and dozens of papers. They're kind of geeky. I write the kind of stuff nobody reads.
Bengstonresearch.com. Okay.
Yeah, that's
I
the
mean, my,
generic one that I put out, and Chris puts out bengshealth.com.
okay. Yeah. I mean, the community listening, I know that they really they appreciate the data and the research like you do more than I mean, testimonials are always very interesting. But actually looking at the research and what you've seen, I think is far more interesting, in my opinion. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, they can be suggestive for sure. And I
yeah.
don't, and I don't say it to minimize, I help my dog. Okay, that's a beautiful thing. Help your
Yes.
dog. Well, on the flip side, I'm going to start working with a veterinarian to do some animal studies,
Mm,
which will be much more systematic and that doesn't put down the testimonials. It doesn't put down the experiences people have. And the experiences people have, drive me up the wall because I'm a skeptic. And I want to take them and put them into systematic data, that will stand any methodological challenges.
hmm.
And that's a little bit different. Probably most people, to be honest, are much more interested in the testimonials than in my geeking along, talking about the 33 detectors I used inside a Faraday cage to do this, that, or the other. They're going to go glaze over.
Yeah.
Just tell me,
Yeah.
stop talking and just tell me what works.
Yeah.
That's the driver, and I don't put that down at all. If I have a need, I have a need.
Hmm.
I don't want to read 35 research papers, but
Right.
if you have any listeners who have a particular masochistic bent, tell them to go to bengstonresearch.com and look at the research, and
Okay.
you'll say, I hope I never go through that again. Just
I mean, I'm
give me the bottle, would you, for crying out loud?
just give it, yeah. I mean, I'm somebody who's always looking into the research, looking into studies. I read studies because I've kind of figured out, oh, that one's nonsense, like that.
Yeah.
I enjoy reading studies, because I think they're interesting. But I do think, on the other hand, some people just want to know, okay, well, let's just tell me what to do, right? I
Yeah,
think that,
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So essentially, both of these are programmed water. Correct me if I'm incorrect. And you've used them both for, it sounds like, the COVID patients. Any other relevant, and obviously this podcast is not medical advice at all, but
No.
any other interesting clinical applications that you've
Oh,
seen?
heavens, yes. And gotten through anecdote, not controlled studies like we had as controlled. There's no flaws in the COVID study.
Mm,
We've got no flaws in a number of clinical applications, but they're more widespread in terms of the kinds of things we've tried it on. We just don't have a couple of hundred people who have schizophrenia and a couple of hundred people who have bipolar, but we're
mhm,
getting ridiculously good. I mean, scratch my head, skeptic, with all sorts of things that I don't know how to tie it together.
mm,
So they're driving me crazy. We've got people with neurological conditions who have been in wheelchairs for years get up and start walking and get rid of their wheelchair. I mean,
wow,
I can't believe this stuff.
mm,
It's too much for my skeptical brain. It
mm,
doesn't mean I say it's wrong. It just means, what do I do with that? There's only a
Yeah.
certain number of hours in the day that you can do so only a certain number of studies. I got to scroll, miles long that of studies that need to be done. I would love to, if you have any good skeptics in the audience, contact me if you want to play. If you got access to
Yeah.
this or that, I'm starting to make inroads with a couple of medical schools over in Europe. I'm doing,
Oh, wow.
so the doors are opening. And this incidentally is something that you can do. I've had 3 recent publications in a traditional, no hocus pocus biology journals,
Hmm.
big international biology journals that are sticklers for, this is going to be seriously reviewed and we'll dump you for mistakes. And that's all good. But the biology journals, who you would think would have trouble with some of the crazy stuff, and I'm acknowledging this stuff is crazy, some of the crazy stuff, say, we can't find a flaw in what you're
Hmm.
doing. And so, fingers crossed, they're publishing it.
Wow.
These are publications in journals that nobody reads, but they're published in scientific journals, and people all over the world read them. I know because I
Hmm.
get emails from all over the world,
Hmm.
and they're looking for, when I get off here, I got to answer a physician in the United Kingdom, a physician over there, a biologist over here, people over there. It's making a dent. But what I'm
Hmm.
trying to say is it's not all or none. The cracks in the edifice are starting to get larger.
Hmm.
People are starting to go, and by people, I mean those scientists are starting to go, this is worth looking at.
Hmm.
And I'm doing some stuff in a particular medical school now um, that could end up making a big splash. I can't talk about it yet.
Hmm.
But
Fascinating.
they're coming out, I've been in a half dozen medical schools. They let me in the door. They set up the thing. They help fund a lot of the stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and they do it under their own umbrella of expertise, because they say, you don't know what you're doing, even if I do. Let us
Hmm.
do it. And they you get the same results, and they go, head scratch, head scratch. Maybe there's something going on here. And if
Hmm.
you poke the beast long enough, it turns out there's more people who are curious about this stuff in a serious way, but they're still afraid to talk about it.
Hmm. Oh,
So if
definitely.
you're a non-tenured biologist, you don't want to say, I want to study hocus pocus. I want to study informed water. Well, what in heaven's name is informed water? I don't know. It's water that's been informed. I just made
Yeah.
up the term. Uh, but really, what is it? Why does it have memory and how does it work?
Hmm.
I'm working on that because it's interesting.
Yeah. Quite a couple questions. One, the people that you mentioned with the neurological conditions, did they know what they were getting? Was
Yeah.
it they
Yeah,
did
these are double-blind, placebo-controlled and all that. These are just, let's see what happens
anecdotal?
if we give these out in a systematic way.
Mm,
But we're not going to lock all the methodological problems, get rid of them all. But isn't this curious? Now, the person, here's where we're going with this. The person in the wheelchair couldn't care less whether you have a double-blind placebo-controlled study. If
right.
they've gotten out of their wheelchair, they're pretty happy.
Yeah, 100%.
The
100%.
skeptic says, let's take that into a controlled setting, laboratory or out in the field, whatever we're going to do, but let's take that in a controlled setting and see what happens then if we've controlled it.
Hmm.
It's been done for some things like COVID, hasn't been done for most things because the research is new.
Hmm.
So we get enough testimonials that say, It fixed my dog. It fixed my cat.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an interesting one.
Because
And
there's
I've
no
gotten this
placebo
from
in
several
animals.
independent vets. Sorry?
I said there's no placebo with animals and babies. It's really hard to have a placebo with them,
Well, I actually
right?
think there is a placebo effect in
Mm.
animals and babies.
Mm.
I have a paper too that's pretty old at this point. Sorry.
That's
Uh,
okay.
I don't know how to turn this off.
It's okay.
Apologies all around. There's an off button. I just don't know what it is.
No worries.
Um, I have a paper that's some years old now that suggests that placebos are a real biological phenomenon.
Mm.
They're
Oh
not
yeah.
psychological. So that
Okay.
if you have, let's say you're doing a drug trial and you get a bunch of volunteers and half of them are given this and half of them are given a placebo. Well, the assumption, one of the faith-based assumptions of this is that separate groups are independent of each other. And
Mm-hmm.
this is called locality, is the term used out there. So my local group here is different than your local group there. If there's non-locality, if there's the possibility of communicating at a distance, and you're in a group, the idea of placebo starts not to make sense.
Mm.
And so if you look at drug trials, you'll notice that if you go through stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 of approval of a drug, it gets larger, it gets more focused, more people, more this, more that, more the other thing. And the placebo effect gets proportionally stronger as you go along.
Mm.
Now that's interesting. A dirty little secret of placebos is that as the group becomes larger, the placebo effect gets stronger.
Mm.
Now, how could that be psychological? And I'm suggesting the possibility that physically separate groups can still be entwined. So that if you jiggle one, you're jiggling the other. Now, to
Mm-hmm.
demonstrate the application, I have, but we're not going to talk about it here in much detail. I have placebo effects. I mean, you can mathematically model it. I have placebo effects in mice that are the same as people. I don't think the mice believe. I have
No,
placebo effects in cell cultures. And here comes the kicker. I have placebo effects in placebos. That probably is confusing.
a little bit.
I've gotten the FDA, for example, to send back placebos that they made that were used in a previous experiment. And I've taken those and given them independently to some biologists to see if there's any biological activity in the placebos that the FDA has made.
Mm.
And it turns out they do. They have biological properties, or they stimulate biological properties in placebos themselves. They're
Mm.
not inert once they've been part of a trial. So the world is seriously more interesting than what we give credit for,
Agree. Agree.
including non-local connections of groups, which may explain placebos.
Mm-hmm. Very
One of the
interesting.
problems in research is making placebos go away because they're
Mm-hmm.
annoying, because
Yeah.
placebos work.
Yeah.
Placebos are beautiful. I don't
Mm.
think they're just psychological. Maybe there's a psychological component, but I think it's
Mm.
more physical. And I've designed a test to do it, to test it. It's a beautiful design. I just haven't had a chance to try to pull it off yet.
You think it's more of a resonance effect?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, think of all the mistakes in data interpretation that are being
100%.
made out there,
100%. That's what I think of all the time.
all
They're
over
not
the
accounting.
place.
Yeah. They're not accounting for that. It's a different paradigm I think people have to adopt. but the current model is flawed. People just they treat science as some sort of like a religion,
Yeah,
and
it's
it's
based
not.
on a series of assumptions and beliefs.
Correct.
If those assumptions and beliefs are wrong, you're going to have a mistaken interpretation of what you found.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going on all over the place.
100%.
So I
Agree.
have a paper, I forget what it's entitled, placebo resonance, placebos, and type 2 errors in research. And basically I'm saying everybody involved in experimental design, you're doing this on the basis of a series of untested assumptions. I think your assumptions are wrong. And therefore I think your conclusions are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yet they still publish me. That doesn't speak very highly of them.
No, it doesn't.
Isn't he the
Huh.
annoying one who said, yeah, I'm the guy.
Interesting. So if someone wanted to, and I'll put the link, of course, as you mentioned, the website for these two, one's Recover, one's Restore. Let's say someone wanted to try these out, and again, not medical advice. Is there a it says on the back, I guess, use a first drop every 15 minutes, one drop, and then one drop every hour as long as the complaints persist. And then one drop 6 times a day for a week. Is that pretty general, or was
It's
there?
pretty general. The basic idea is that we front load it. So
Okay.
if you're gonna settle down on a drop or two drops every 4 times a day,
Hmm.
do it 6 times a day and put a couple extra drops in. There's not going to be
Hmm.
side effects. So we front load it and then we back off.
Okay.
If we're doing an experimental protocol, then we've got to set up the parameters right up front
Parameters.
and follow them. In the COVID study, I think we did 2 drops 6 times a day under the
Okay.
tongue. And
Okay.
some people just got tap water. Some people got tap water that was put through our device. Out comes this informed water, and the informed water informs. I mean, the vague statement, but it's what we got so far.
So the device that essentially creates the water, it's a device, uh, correct?
Doesn't create it. It reproduces it.
Reproduces it. Okay.
Yeah.
Is
So
this is this
the
through like
creation of it went
frequency or?
through the creation of it went through a variety of steps without the device, and then we got the golden plot of water, and we put that water in the reproducing device.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
And then we can make, we could churn out easily a million doses.
Mm.
That's better than a piece of cotton. I don't think the cotton is worse than the water, but I
No.
can give you a million pieces of water and it's not difficult. I can't give you a million pieces of cotton.
Mm-mm.
If I can get a million recordings that have gone through rigorous testing, but so far the recordings are not really reproducing the phenomena. It's reproducing a chunk of it, but it's not reproducing all of it. And as a
Mm.
good card carrying skeptic, I want the whole Monty.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So right now, my best bet is water.
Interesting. Well, I think that will definitely be interesting to people listening. It's interesting to me, and I'm kind of like, all right. I've had to reschedule this interview twice because my daughter has been not well. So I'm like, well, why not? Why not? Why not try
Yeah.
and see how it
And
works?
remember, because I'm the cautious one.
Mm,
Remember, it's not usually anything approaching instantaneous magic.
mm,
It'd be like if you started taking a vitamin,
mm-hmm.
when did it kick in? When did you feel it? And, what are your needs? So when we did our studies on the water on Restore,
Mm-hmm.
we had people monitor themselves for 8 weeks, with
Okay.
various measurements and such. And
Okay.
sometimes it took Well, I mean, there was a variation that looked like a normal curve distribution, but there were variations in how long, when, whatever they were looking for relief, there were
Hmm.
variations in how long it took them to get it. For most people, they didn't notice much for 2 weeks.
Okay.
It's not like you're taking it and you start flopping on the floor and levitating and things like that.
Correct.
Whatever it is, and we don't know what it is, whatever it is, there's a real process involved. And I think it's up to your body. What does your
Hmm.
body need? What does your body want? What can the water give to you?
Hmm.
It's not a conscious thing. It's body to water or water to body. What can we do for you? Um, and so the processes of getting better are processes. They're
Hmm.
not instantaneous magical things. I took a drop, it didn't work. Nah, that's great. That's magical thinking. Magic has
Yeah.
happened, but I don't believe it. Magic has happened, but it's rare.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I'm willing to try it with her to see.
Oh yeah, you
And
got nothing to lose. Give it a
yeah,
go.
exactly. There's, like you said, I don't think that there's negative side effects to it. So it's water. Um, so yeah, I'll try it out with her. And if people are wanting to check these two out, do you recommend taking them both together or trying one or the other
If
or
if if you have a virus, and as you alluded earlier, all viruses aren't bad. We
Mhm.
if we get rid of all the viruses in our body, the side effect would be death.
Mhm.
So there are some good viruses and some not so good viruses. There's some good bacteria and not so good
Right.
bacteria. Get rid of
Correct.
all the foreign or non-human cells in your body, you wouldn't be. You'd just be a
Right.
little blob on the floor. Um, what do you need? What are you missing? That's where the water tends to stimulate something.
Mhm.
I don't know the mechanism of action all up and down the line. Right now that's still past my pay grade.
Mhm.
Something happens, but it doesn't, instantly happen. You don't start levitating. At least we haven't heard it yet. Sometimes you get fast results. Sometimes it takes 2 to 4 weeks. We seem to get within 4 weeks, you'll know if you're getting a benefit.
Mhm. Okay. And
And
like
so we've gotten mail
both of
from
them?
people to say, we should have continued this longer because it kicked in at 6 weeks and went to 8 weeks and I was still getting stronger. If you had, kept watching me, suddenly it took them 6 to 8 weeks to get started, and then it's spiraling uphill to a good outcome. Uh,
Mm,
but some people get better in 2 weeks, and who knows? Who
interesting.
knows?
Well, it's worth a try.
Yeah.
And I'll definitely put all the links down in the show notes for everyone who wants to look into the research and actually look at the papers. I've got that pulled up here on my computer. And then the other site, if they want to check out the products. And I think they gave me a code Sarah to use my name as a discount if people want to take advantage of that. Again, it'll be in the show notes. But anything else that I didn't ask you about or that you want to let people know about in the conversation?
Oh, I want to talk about research for the next 6 months, but I don't think I don't think your podcast goes that long, and
No.
someone would come out and shoot me. Just like shut up, get to the bottom line.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So if you want to play, look at some of the research and contact me, and we'll play.
I love it. Well,
I
you never
just
know
hope
who's
you're not a
listening.
believer.
Yeah. Yeah, agree. And I always tell people,
Believers scare
just
me. Believers
don't
scare
do
me.
it. Yeah, I feel the same way, honestly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me today. I think this was a very interesting conversation, brings up a lot of ideas and things for people to think about. And I'll try this stuff out. I don't see what I have to lose at this point. And
See what you get.
yeah, see what happens. Well, thank you
Hopefully you
again.
get something good, and we're on the road to wonderful things.
Agree. Thank you so much for listening to the Evolving Wellness Podcast. Just a quick little reminder, this is not medical advice nor meant to be taken as a substitute for working one-on-one with a healthcare practitioner. And if you enjoy the show, please head on over to Apple or Spotify to leave the show up to a 5-star review. If you're over on YouTube, please leave us a like, leave us a comment. I really appreciate you for being here, for listening to the show, and your support means the world to me as I continue to try to pull guests from around the world to bring you informative content to empower you to make decisions about your own health. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.